Hello students, this is Baldev from Global Education Center and today I will be talking about a chapter called as life process, which is the first unit in grade 10. So when we talk about life process, we will be focusing on various processes happening in the human body and how they help in normal functioning of the human body. Something like Indian democracy where there is division of labor and various work is given to various ministers and how well they perform is what defines the country's progress. And unlike in Indian democracy, our life process do not follow any corruption as such. It has to function normal and that is the only way how we can function normally. Okay, so under life process we will be focusing on nutrition in plants, nutrition in animals, that is the process of digestion, how the food we consume is broken down and how they eat energy. And then we will be focusing on the next unit, that is respiration. So when we talk about respiration, we will be talking about intake of oxygen, why should we intake oxygen, how that oxygen is helping us in yielding energy. And then the next part of life process in the same chapter will be focusing on circulatory system, that is the functioning of the heart, how this heart is helping in transporting blood to various parts of the body, and once they reach various parts of the body, how it helps in the functioning of the body. And last but not the least, that we will be focusing on the excretion. So under excretion we will be focusing on how the process of urine formation takes place, what is the importance of it, and so on. Okay, so in today's session we will be starting off with nutrition. So when we talk about nutrition, what is nutrition? Basically it's a mode of nourishing ourselves or being nourished. Okay, so when we talk about nutrition, one important aspect of nutrition that we focus on is, that is, what are the types of nutrition. Okay, so when we talk about types of nutrition or mode of nutrition, there are two modes of nutrition, that is autotrophic nutrition and heterotrophic nutrition. Now biology becomes very simple when we just try to understand the meaning of the words. Okay, so when we say autotrophic, auto means self, trophic means nutrition. Okay, so these are the organisms which prepare their own food. They do not depend on any other organism for their food, rather they prepare their own food, something like our mothers who prepare their own food and we go eat that food. We become heterotrophic. Hetero means dependent, okay, trophic means nutrition. So these are the organisms which dependent on other organisms for their food sources. Okay, so when we talk about autotrophic, that is the first thing that comes to our mind is green plants. Green plants are the source of the food. Basically they manufacture their own food with the help of sunlight. Now when we talk about autotrophic is further classified into two types, that is photoautotrophic and chemoautotrophic. So photo means light, autotrophic again means these are the organisms which depend on light for the manufacturing of food. Okay, so under photoautotrophic the examples that we need to focus on is green plants, and then we have chemoautotrophic. So when we talk about chemoautotrophic, these are the organisms which dependent on chemicals for the manufacturing of their food. For example, it could be a simple chemical like a sulfur. Okay, so these are the bacteria, or we call them as chemosynthetic bacteria, which utilize the chemicals in the surroundings and manufacture their own food. Then moving on with heterotrophic. So when we talk about heterotrophic, there are three types under heterotrophic, that is saprophytic, which are the ones that feed on dead and decaying organisms. Now if not for the saprophytic and for the amount of war the earth has faced, we would have been filled with dead bodies around. Okay, so that makes it an important feature of saprophytic because they feed on dead and decaying organisms, and since they are also called as the decomposers of the living world. Okay, so examples under saprophytic is fungi and bacteria. So the second type under heterotrophic is parasitic. Now parasitic are something that live on a host and start feeding on the host. Okay, they live on a living host and start feeding on those living hosts. So when we talk about parasitic, we have two types of parasitic, that is ectoparasites and endoparasites. Now the meaning of the word ecto means outside, endo means inside. Ectoparasites are those which live on the outside of a living organism, and endoparasites are those which live within a living organism. An example for an ectoparasite is a leech, which lives on the outside of the human body or any living organism and start feeding on the blood of the organism. an endoparasite which lives within. A classic example for that is tapeworm. When a human consumes an uncooked meat, there is a possibility that this tapeworm might enter and start living in the intestine of the human body. And whatever the food that we consume is being utilized by the tapeworm for their survival. And then the last type under heterotrophic, that is insectivorous. Now these are the plants which live in a soil which is not having enough nitrogen, or which is deficient of nitrogen in the soil. Okay, so these are the plants which do not have nitrogen, so they depend on an insect for the nitrogen supplement. So this is how they compensate the nitrogen that is not present in the soil. Okay, so this is with regards to the classification of nutrition. Now, first we will be focusing on nutrition in plants. So when we talk about nutrition in plants, fine. So the first thing that should come to our mind is called as photosynthesis. Now, in your lower classes, you would have already studied about photosynthesis, telling that it is a process seen in the green plants which utilizes sunlight and carbon dioxide to manufacture their own food. So exactly, so when we talk about photosynthesis, the easy way to remember photosynthesis is just understand the equation. So when you look into this equation, the definition of photosynthesis is self-explanatory. Now what does the equation say? 6CO2 plus 12 H2O. On the arrow we have chlorophyll and sunlight. Then C6H12O6 plus 6H2O plus 6O2. So how do I define it now? So green plants, now when we say photosynthesis, it's a physiochemical process by which green plants utilize carbon dioxide in the presence of sunlight absorbed by the chlorophyll to manufacture glucose and giving out water and oxygen as the byproduct. So if you can understand the equation, the definition of photosynthesis is self-explanatory. Okay? Now, before we go into in-depth of the photosynthesis or the steps involved in photosynthesis, first we need to understand where the process of photosynthesis is taking place. The process of photosynthesis takes place in the leaf of a green plant. Now, when we talk about the leaf of the green plant, there are two types of parenchyma, that is spongy parenchyma and palisade parenchyma. Now this is to touch upon your grade 9. You would have learned about simple permanent tissue that is called as parenchyma, right? So the parenchyma is also found in the green plants, that is spongy and palisade parenchyma, and in this parenchyma we find an organelle called as chloroplast. Okay, again in grade 9, in the first chapter, that is a fundamental unit of life, you would have learned about something called as chloroplast. Now, chloroplast has a very good resemblance with that of a mitochondria because they are double membrane organelle. Then they are also called as kitchen of the plant cell. Why are they called as kitchen of the plant cell? Because the entire process of photosynthesis takes place in this chloroplast. That is, the manufacturing of glucose happens within this chloroplast. Hence, they are called as a kitchen of the plant cell. So, when we discuss about photosynthesis, it becomes mandatory to understand the structure of chloroplast. Now, let's just look into the structure of a chloroplast. It's a double membrane organelle. So, there is an outer membrane, there is an inner membrane. Okay, and if you look into the diagram, there is a disc-shaped structure that you observe here, and this disc-shaped structure individually is called as thylakoid, and as a group, it's called as the grana. Okay, so this particular grana, each of these grana are attached together by a structure called as frets. Each of these grana are attached together by a structure called as frets, and the cytoplasm of the chloroplast is called as stroma. Okay, so we will be trying to understand the steps of photosynthesis, but we need to know that the process of photosynthesis takes place here. And if you look into this reaction, I mentioned that chlorophyll, and in the definition that I told, we suggested that, I told that the chlorophyll is the one that helps in absorption of sunlight. Now, looking into this chloroplast, where do we find this chlorophyll? That's the next question. Now, this chlorophyll is found in the outer membrane of this thylakoid. So we have the disc-like structure, that is thylakoid. In the outer membrane of this disc-like structure is where we find the chlorophyll. Now let us try to understand the steps involved in photosynthesis. Now if you look into the NCERT point of view, it just suggests 3 points in the steps involved in photosynthesis. But photosynthesis is a very complex process. Okay, so let's try to understand these 3 points before going into the complex process. Now the first step in photosynthesis obviously is the absorption of sunlight. Now this absorption of sunlight is taken care by the structure called as chlorophyll, which is found in the chloroplast. The second step in photosynthesis is once the light has been absorbed, it has to be converted into a chemical energy. So the light that is being absorbed by the chlorophyll is then converted into a chemical energy, and there is also something called as photolysis of water. Now photo means light, lysis means breakdown. So the water is being broken down by the light that was being absorbed by the chlorophyll. Now what happens when the photolysis of water takes place? The water breaks down into an H plus ion, oxygen and an electron. Now the H plus ion, that is a proton, and the electron that is being formed here is helpful in manufacturing the energy currency called as ATP. Now why is ATP required? That is required for the third step, that is reduction of carbon dioxide into glucose. When carbon dioxide is being reduced into glucose, for this reaction to take place, there is an energy requirement, that is nothing but the ATP. So this is why the process of photolysis of water is very important, okay, for the manufacturing of the energy molecule, that is ATP. So this ATP helps in reduction of carbon dioxide to glucose, and thus we get this particular process of photosynthesis, that is glucose and oxygen as a byproduct. Clear? So this is about the steps involved in photosynthesis. Now there are a lot of questions by the scientists telling that how conclusively we can say that carbon dioxide is a necessity, chlorophyll is a necessity, and sunlight is a necessity. So there were several activities that were performed to understand why these 3 important components, that is sunlight, chlorophyll and carbon dioxide, is a necessity for the process of photosynthesis. Now to understand that, they perform various activities, and that activities we will be focusing on the next video or in the next session. Clear? Now before going into concluding this session, I'll just give a hint to the next session, that is I told you various activities were being performed, right? Now how do we test that particular activity? Now if photosynthesis has occurred, one of the conclusive product is starch or glucose, which goes on to turn into a complex structure, that is starch. Now this starch has to be tested at the end of each and every activity. Now that is what we are trying to understand here in this flow chart, how this starch has been tested. Now to understand that, there is a step procedure that we need to follow. What is the procedure? First we take the green leaf. This is after the test our activity has been performed. We take the green leaf and boil it in the water. Now why do we have to do that? So when you boil the green leaf in the water, it breaks the cell wall and cell membrane. Clear? Then you place that boiled leaf in a test tube containing alcohol. Now the next question is why? Because it will dissolve the chlorophyll. Now chlorophyll, if it is dissolved, that means the leaf will turn from green to colorless. Okay? And then you place that particular leaf in a cold water, and the last step is you add a drop of iodine solution. Now when iodine solution comes in contact with starch, it turns blue-black, and that is why it was mandatory to place the leaf in the alcohol so that the chlorophyll gets dissolved. So on adding iodine solution, if starch is present, the leaf will turn blue-black in color, and that is how I can say the process of photosynthesis has occurred. So in the next session or in the next video, we will be looking into various activities, how they concluded that sunlight, chlorophyll and carbon dioxide is a necessity for the process of photosynthesis. So until then, have a great day, great week. See you in the next video. Thank you.